progress.
I'm not planning to start until it's actually 7. So far. All right, the clock in the hall shows 7 o'clock. Thank you, everyone, for showing up on this windy and somewhat rainy evening so far. Can we take roll?
Commissioner Barnes?
Here.
Commissioner Chomsky?
Here.
Commissioner Javadal? Present. And Chair McCroskey?
Yes.
Commissioner Pang is absent tonight.
Right. I'd like to read the land acknowledgement. The City of Albany recognizes that we occupy the land originally protected by the Confederated Villages of Lejeune. We acknowledge the genocide that took place on these lands and must make strides to repay the moral debt that is owed to this indigenous people, specifically the Ohlone tribe. We thank them for their contributions, which have transformed our community and will continue to bring forth growth and unity. The City of Albany commits to sustaining ongoing relationships with the tribe and to together build a better future for all that now make this their home. With that, we'll move on to item 2, public comment. This is for items that are of interest to you that are not otherwise on the agenda this evening. There will be other public comment times when we get there. I understand there's at least one attendee outside the room. And are they?
No hands are currently raised.
No hands are currently raised. And I believe it's the *9 function if you've called in on a phone in order to raise your hand. So we'll give just a moment to make sure that nobody intends to do so.
Oh, sorry, we just got a hand raised.
Okay.
Okay. Sorry, just a moment. Mr. Pringuelo, please go ahead.
Just making sure, this is public comment, right?
That's correct.
General public comment.
General public comment, anything that's not on the agenda. Okay, I just want to make sure I wasn't, pulling anything from consent for the minutes or anything like that. Okay, great. I just want to take this moment just to express my gratitude and appreciation for all the commissioners up there. I know how it is to be a commissioner myself. I spent the last 2 years serving the public on the SCJC as a school district's appointee. And I don't know if all of you get a big thank you from anybody, but I just want to show my appreciation because I know it's a lot of volunteer time. I know it takes a lot of work outside of these meetings to prepare. And so I don't know if you all get appreciated enough.
The-
members of the committee. Thank you, and keep up the good work, everybody.
Thank you for your comment.
There are no other hands raised.
With that, we'll end public comment and move on to the presentations. Our first one this evening is Commissioner Member Introductions. And this is a chance to take just a few sentences to introduce yourselves. We have a new commissioner, and so Harry was seated last meeting and is a returning commissioner.
So I'm the only new person.
Right, so why don't we share a little bit about ourselves to you, and then you can share with us.
Works.
Would you like to kick us off?
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Farid Javandel. I have served variously on the Traffic and Safety Commission, now the Transportation Commission, since 2000. Took 8 years off to be on council because so much fun. No, it just was an opportunity to follow some of the projects that we worked on, quite frankly. I currently work as Deputy Director of Public Works for the City of Berkeley, and I've been a registered traffic engineer since 1995. So it's all just kind of comes very naturally to me, and I'm really honored to have the opportunity to participate and help the community in any way I can.
Thank you. I'll go next. I've been on the commission since 2009, and since then, I've done a lot of work with Safe Routes to Schools, I guess before then, and I've become a League of American Bicyclists certified cycling instructor. I really enjoyed the process of developing the first active transportation plan. I'm a strong believer in people making choices about how they get around, whether it's walking or driving or bicycling, whatever mode of transportation, but that we have a mix that people can access. And at the same time that we make sure that Albany stays vibrant and that our businesses are healthy. And I'm a longtime member of the Albany Strollers and Rollers Service and Advocate Group. And I've done a lot of events with organizing events and organizing bike valet parking.
I'm Harry Chomsky. I have lived in Albany since 2001, and I started getting involved with Albany Strollers and Rollers in around 2009, I think. So I'm one of the more long-term members of that group, not one of the founders. And I served on the Traffic and Safety Commission, as it was then called, from around 2015 to 2019, I think. About 5 years in the late teens, and really enjoyed participating in this way, and I'm glad to be back. I'm also a climate change advocate with the group Citizens Climate Lobby.
And I am Michael Barnes. Let's see. My first tour of duty as a public official in Albany was back in the year 2002 when I was on the school board for 4 years, which is kind of pertinent for tonight. So I was on the school board from 2002 to 2006. Then I was on the council from 2012 to 2020. Was termed out, and here I am back after 2 years. It's good to see everybody again, actually. And what are my other recommendations? I worked on campus for 11 years. I commuted every day on my bike, except for once in a blue moon when I needed to carry something valuable. And that was too big for the bike, like artwork or something. So I calculated I did 2,500 round trips and 16,000 miles of commuting during those years. And it was actually good. It was it was helpful it's good to do some kind of low-speed training if you're a serious cyclist, so that was fine. And, I ride my bike a lot. I've toured in Europe and done a hill climb event in Taiwan and all that groovy stuff. And I still putt around town. Ken and I worked together on the Blue Glove crew. And I used to bother Fareed when he was on the city council. And Harry hasn't been bugged by me yet, but I'll work on that. So that's me. Thanks. Just
Thank you.
kidding.
People usually say what they mean. But that's up to you. Great. Did anybody have any questions based on what they heard?
No, I think I'm going to just offer the comment that every one of us, including staff sitting up here, commutes by bike to the best of my knowledge. So I think we practice what we preach, and I enjoy that. Good company. Not that biking is the only way to get around, but the fact that we can and do is nice.
I mean, maybe preach what we practice. Right?
Well, and it's good because this body also sits as the Bicycle Advisory Committee for Albany. So it's good to have that level of experience. Great. So what we'll do is we'll ask Nelson to watch ours and bring his when he's next with us, if that's okay.
Yep, I'll keep it as a presentation item next month.
Thank you. With that, let's move on to the monthly police data on collisions and citations.
Give me 1 second. There we go. Thank you, Chair. So I'm presenting data from the month of January this month, and there were 0 pedestrian-involved collisions, 0 bicycle-involved collisions in January. There were 13 collisions, 3 of which were injury collisions reported. There were 27 moving citations issued and 2 DUI arrests. And that concludes the police data.
Can I ask a question? Can you go back to the first line graph after the bar graphs? City of Police reports vehicle collisions per month. That's vehicle collisions with each other.
So the top line is total vehicle collisions per month. The bottom line is injury collisions, report of injury involved in the collision.
But is this, who or what did they hit in this graph?
It is all vehicle-involved collisions, and the first 2 pull out anyone that involves a pedestrian or cyclist.
So this is the sum plus crashes with each other and crashes into poles and whatnot. Okay. Thank you.
Just for background, we tend to use this as just sort of a monthly check-in, as sort of a quick look at what's going on to make sure that we don't miss anything. And then on a more yearly or half-yearly, I think yearly basis, we look at a little more in depth.
Okay.
Are there any other commissioner questions? I see we have a public comment. So let's go to public comment.
Thank you. Did you mention 23 or 27 traffic collisions for vehicles?
You can
27.
finish.
Okay. The reason why I asked is because I was wondering the possible locations of those collisions. How many of those collisions were possibly close to a school within a couple blocks or proximity of a school? Maybe in future police collision datas or citations, maybe it would be nice to get some feedback or some data collected on locations around the schools. I know it'd be tough to get every location for all of them and explain that during this
For the minutes, that was Mr. Garrett Pinguello. And that might be an interesting suggestion for one of our later agenda items.
I'll just note the clarification there. It was 13 vehicle collisions and 27 was the moving citations issued.
Any comments from commissioners? Thank you, staff, for that data. And let's move on to our shared mobility data.
So I will kick this off with a chart you're familiar with, and then we'll go into some new material. Just a sec. So reporting out on gig ridership for the fourth quarter of 2022. They saw approximately 8% increase in the number of trips to over 2,000 starts and ends. That's the red line there. And they reported 867 members in the fourth quarter of 2022. So some consistent increase in use.
Please.
Is this active members who live in Albany?
So active members was, there's been some changes in reporting over time. So there's two, to get you oriented here, there's two vertical bars, which are sort of transitions in how they've reported data over time. They've now switched to this new total members, which isn't, is basically just Albany residents who are members of GIG. Previously, they were reporting some level of active use in the membership. It was a little different in what they're doing now, which is why they're marked a little differently, so it's clear that they're a little different data. But it is just within Albany members and trips that either start or end in Albany. Within their larger service area.
The obvious comment is that you can really see the COVID pandemic in there. It's pretty amazing how fast it dropped off in 2020.
Yep.
That's all. Thanks.
Any other questions?
And we have a second part to the presentation. If we
Yes.
could continue to that, I will
Let's do
stop
that.
my screen share and hand it over to Michelle.
Okay. So as many of the commissioners know, but perhaps not all, the company VIO, which is a shared scooter micromobility company, launched in Albany in October of last year. And we recently got access to a data platform to allow us to see the usage data in depth. So I have a few different slides here showing a variety of data that we've gathered. And we're still kind of honing in exactly what we're going to be showing you on a monthly basis. But this is the number of trips taken per week since their launch, with the total at the top there. It averages out to about 40 trips per week. As you can see, there's a bit of a dip during the many rainstorms that we had in December and January. This is the fleet size. So this is the number of VIO scooters that were in the city on average throughout a week. We have some missing data from November and December. That's just sort of a data error. So we're working on getting that data gathered. But as you can see, it's been rising somewhat steadily and is generally in the 20s or teens of number of scooters located in the city. Then we have trips by duration. So the blue and green here, it says bicycle and scooter at the bottom. The bicycles are not actually bicycles, they're really sit-down scooters, but that's just the way that the data platform distinguishes between the two. But as you can see, the most common trip length is 5 to 10 minutes, but there's also quite a few that are longer, 15, 30 minutes, some even up to an hour long. as well as some shorter trips. And you can also see that generally people are using the sit-down scooters for their longer trips, sort of interesting. And the average trip duration was about 13 minutes.
Do you know what the travel time is? I mean, the total amount of minutes you can travel before the battery goes dead? I wouldn't have thought it was 30 minutes, but.
I think it's a fair amount of time. It depends on, if you're going uphill and that sort of thing, but I don't have a great estimate of the average.
And it depends on how much charge there was on the vehicle
Right.
when you got there, so.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's-
Yeah. We also have some location-based data. So this map here shows trip origin points. At the moment, we really just have data for trips in Albany, but we can see the origin points of trips that came to Albany or ended in Albany that might have been outside of the city as well. So the red dots are the places where there are a higher number of trip origins. Blue dots have a lower number. As you can see, there's a lot of trip origin points on our sort of main corridors, Solano, San Pablo, the Greenway. Also quite a few trip starts around University Village and various parts of Berkeley, including the North Berkeley BART station and the downtown and campus area. So nothing hugely surprising there, but we can see lots of people coming into Albany from surrounding areas. And there's also a trip destinations version of this, which I didn't include, but it's a very similar picture. And then we also have trips. So this chart shows the frequency of usage for various road segments. And as you can see, the red ones have a higher frequency. And the way that it works is that every 7 seconds, the scooters will send a GPS ping. And so it's basically counting the number of pings that take place in each road segment. So again, as you might imagine, we're seeing heavy usage along Masonic and the Greenway and along Solano. Also, San Pablo, sort of near University Village, not so much in the northern part without bike lanes. And I'll note that Pierce Street looks like it has very heavy usage, but that's a bit of a data anomaly because the segment that they have for Pierce Street is the entire street. So it's showing a lot of pings and when it might just be a few trips. So just a note, we're working on fixing that. But yes, this gives you a sense of where people are riding. And that concludes my report.
Question. 2 questions. What do we know about theft or vandalism of these scooters and bikes? Has that been raised?
We're still working on gathering complaint or issue data. We have only gotten 1 complaint that was called into the city, but we're not sure about complaints that were called into the company quite yet. But generally, we haven't heard that there's been.
I mean, after all the vandalism on Solano, I'm wondering if anybody bothered to vandalize the scooters there too. And the other question is accidents. We're hearing emergency room data now is that especially the scooters have certain type of accidents like faceplant accidents you don't see so much on a bicycle. Do we have any data on accident rates for these vehicles? I'm sure it's got to go to the ER. If anybody if nobody goes to the ER or the doctor, we know nothing. That's the same as true with bicycle crashes. I've had many and I never went to the ER. But if they do go to the ER, do we get that data? It would be, the issue is, I'm sure, trust me if I'm wrong, or tell me if I'm wrong. Don't trust me if I'm wrong. It's like where you assign scooters. Do they go on the sidewalks? Do they go on the street? Do they go on bike paths? And data on how people crash and hurt themselves might be useful in the long run.
Yeah, we don't have a health department to liaise like San Francisco, I think, can better coordinate their accident information. Our main data sources are if there is a police report, we get it through the collision data. We can request data. I think they reported they haven't had any accidents over this period to us, but we can make sure we have, formalized that they have to report to us collisions that,
Yeah.
you know, they know about with their vehicles.
Berkeley does have its own health department too, so they might pick up similar data to what we have, or what we could use.
Any other commission questions?
The other question I'd pose to the commission as we look to, you know, fold this into our quarterly reporting is what information you're interested in seeing on a regular basis for them. This was sort of the overview of what kind of information we have access to from their platform, but if there are specifics besides what we've been doing for the others in terms of just getting usage and membership, please let us know.
One kind of question, and I don't know whether the data lends itself to answering this, but just the patterns of the streets. You know, obviously, there's destinations along those streets that have high usage. There's also transit along those streets. One of the theories is that these scooters serve as a last mile connection from transit to people's destinations. And if any of the data that comes out sort of validates that by more pings close to the bus stops than away from the bus stops, that'd be kind of interesting to see. Not urgent, but if it's convenient and easy to find, that would be, like I say, kind of interesting data, as well as any key destinations that really stand out.
Yeah, there's actually a feature on the data management system that allows us to hone in on specifically trips that start or end near public transit. We have to set that up, but we can to get some data on that.
Also schools, I bet. I know there's a teenager in my neighborhood who uses one of these scooters to go from northeast Albany down to St. Mary's. So I bet you'll see a clustering around schools too.
Mm-hmm.
Private scooter use, I think, will be easier with students. I think they're limiting usage. You need a driver's license, but there's also, I think, a requirement. It's been a few months since we went into it, but a requirement for helmet if it's under 18, I think. So I think they were just limiting it to 18, but I'll double check that.
Okay. You might just be a senior, but.
Other questions? Okay, so let's take public comment on shared mobility as a whole.
Good evening. My name is Jeremiah. It would be nice in the future to possibly get a presentation from VO or a presentation from GIG. I know in October I was here at the city council meeting when VO was approved. I even brought a VO scooter into this room because I had actually just found it on Solano, and it was theft related. It was on, and there was graffiti on it, and I turned it over to the VO staff for that. Also, just want to let everybody know that anybody can get a helmet from VO. I did get a helmet, and they have an abundance of helmets, so it'd be nice to share with the public somehow, just to call VO and request a helmet to be sent to them in the mail. Came really fast. It's a really nice helmet. It's really comfortable and it's really nice. So just reminding, helmets are free. Also, regarding accidents on those, I think Rochelle Nason was big on not voting yes on VO because she was afraid of the liability for the streets and accidents, but it was approved. Also, regarding the gig electric, or regarding the gig vehicles, are those hybrids or are those electric? Or are they gas powered? I know in the future we're trying to go electric, and we have a climate action committee, and it's really big on electric vehicles and reducing carbon emissions. So if we could somehow in the future talk to gig cars and request or kind of encourage them to go electric, that would be really nice. I know we can't tell them what to do, but the goal for that would be to help reduce carbon emissions for local rides in Albany, and it would help kind of lead the pathway to going green.
I do have the VO app on my phone. It's on my other phone. But I did notice that there's a missing triangle right here at the city hall. So if you were to park the VO, you can't park it here at the city hall. It's kind of a missing part in the map. So maybe we could talk to VO and just expand this area around the city hall. That way people can ride VO to these public meetings. That would be kind of neat. But I did notice that there's a few areas where the map, you can't park it. So in City Hall is one of them.
Thank you for your comments.
We don't have any hands raised online.
Thank you. Then we'll bring it back to the commission. It's my memory that the gig cars are hybrid.
They're all Priuses, aren't
They're Priuses, right. They may not be exclusively Prius, but
They're hybrid. They have used electric fleet in other markets. They've expressed interest. They rely on users to do a lot of the fueling, so I think they're interested in more fast chargers to align with before they roll out a lot more all electric, but they are interested in that going forward.
as far as the VO scooters go, I assume that the city requested the city hall area or block be blocked out for public safety reasons?
We'll look at where they have their zones for no ride. I don't believe we requested it, but they prefer public property, so that they might have looked at larger lot areas. I don't know. We'll have to look at why that might be.
There are specific regions that are blocked out, including UC Village.
Does that mean you can't track them, or do they die? But if you try to go into that region, they just
We
turn them.
want to make sure we get your comments on the microphone.
Oh, sorry. So when you say they're blocked out, does that mean that they disappear from the map but still function, or that they stop functioning?
No, in general, it means that you can't end your ride there and check out in the application and end your fee charging session. So they actually have spots on the map where you can't end. So you have to physically move the scooter out of that area if you're in it.
Well, I can see why, given I lived there for 5 years, and casual theft was very high in the village, including my bike the first week I lived there.
It's a UC issue, not a theft issue. UC has not authorized the use of VO scooters on any of its property.
Really? Because there's a bunch of scooters on campus. Maybe they're privately owned.
Officially,
Yeah.
you can see on the map that we have that there was at least one person who made it through UC Village, but they couldn't park there. They may have had to walk the scooter while they were there. Are there commissioner comments? More commissioner comments or feedback? What do you think of the complement of information that we've been provided in tonight's report, especially for the VO scooters?
Well, I have nothing to compare it to, but it seems fine, but I'm presuming it'll get more and more developed over time.
Yes, especially if there's any commissioner comments about what you would like to see or not see.
Well, Fareed already made one comment. Harry, do you?
I can't think of anything specific. It's a great start, and I'm curious to see what we'll come up with for requests for future presentations, but I don't have anything in mind right now.
I think it's good. Is it cumbersome to provide all of this information, or is that pretty quick?
No, it's pretty quick. These charts are all pre-populated within the data system, so it's pretty easy to pull them up.
I think with the addition of a transit intersection map, there's a better way to say that, it would be pretty robust. This is good. Any last thoughts on mobility? Then let's keep moving along. And we have one item on the consent calendar this evening, and that is the meeting minutes of January 26th. Are there any commissioners who have corrections or comments and want to pull the meeting minutes from the consent calendar? Are there any members of our listening or present audience who wish to make comments or corrections on the minutes? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion on the consent calendar.
So moved.
Second.
So moved by Barnes and seconded by Javendal. Any further discussion? Could we have a roll vote?
Commissioner Barnes,
Yes.
Commissioner Chomsky,
Yes.
Commissioner Javendal,
Aye.
Chair McCroskey.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Great. With that, we'll move along to item number 5.1. And we're going to discuss and potentially take action first on the 15 mile per hour reduced speed zones near schools item.
Great. Thank you, Chair McCroskey. So some background on this item. The California Vehicle Code regulates the setting of speed limits on city streets. While it permits 15 mile per hour speed limits within 500 feet of school grounds when children are present by a local resolution or ordinance, it does state that a local authority shall take into consideration provisions of an engineering and traffic survey. So that is the primary step that would need to be taken before a resolution could be brought to City Council. Prior Transportation Commission discussions on this, after reviewing in 2018, the Commission took no action at that discussion. The highest concerns were reviewed to be regarding around speeds on Buchanan, Marin, and Solano, which don't qualify under the provisions of where we could set 50 mile per hour speed limits, and loading behavior at the schools compared with the speeds on the eligible streets. A number of safe routes, safety measures, and crossing improvements have been done to address the areas of highest concern near the schools following Safe Routes to Schools improvement plans. In 2021, the Commission discussed speed limits in the context of changes to state law and directed staff to return with a plan on how to proceed with the implementation of reduced speed school zones and reduced speed limits on Solano Avenue. Reduced speeds on Solano Avenue were implemented in conjunction with the establishment of the Parklet program regulations and are now in effect. And this presentation provides the steps on proceeding with the reducing speeds near schools.
You're fading away a little bit.
Sorry. Other discussions have also overlapped with this topic at the Commission. Speeds on Santa Fe have been discussed with regards to the traffic calming program, on Key Route when discussing the conceptual designs for striping in conjunction with paving project, and on Brighton with the middle school annex construction. More recently, AUSD staff has also inquired about potential traffic calming for Brighton at the middle school, as well as on Cornell and Talbot adjacent to the elementary school. AB 43, which changed the rules which allowed for the lowered speed limit on Solano, also does have provisions that may allow for 20 mile per hour speed limits on roadways that aren't currently allowed to have the 15 or 20 mile near schools. And this section of the law awaits state guidance called for in the legislation and is to take effect in the middle of 2024. So for your discussion tonight, these are the 19 roadway segments within the city's roadways that appear to meet the criteria for 15 mile per hour speed limits when children are present. They're essentially the areas within city jurisdiction that are within 500 feet of school grounds. we do have some data on speeds and volumes from previous traffic surveys, primarily from the traffic calming program. And this is some of the relevant volumes and speeds associated with that. We have changed our criteria over time, so some of these are showing the newer vehicles, number of average daily vehicles traveling over 25 miles per hour, which is now our review number for traffic calming requests, and older ones that we're reporting out on the 85th percentile speed. The higher volume streets that do qualify are Jackson, Santa Fe, Key Route, and Brighton. So the program would involve contracting for engineering and traffic surveys for those 19 roadways that would qualify. Would be then go to City Council consideration of a resolution to establish the lower speed limit, and then installation of the required signage. So the staff recommendation is that you consider making a recommendation to City Council to direct staff to conduct the engineering and traffic surveys on the eligible streets within 500 feet of Albany schools, and prepare a resolution establishing the 15 miles per hour reduced speed zones for City Council consideration. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, Commissioner questions? You've gone first consistently. Let's see if there are other, no?
It's better to go last.
So can you explain a little more about AB 43? Like what has gone into effect already, and how do those changes affect what we do now? What is going into effect in 2024, and should we be preparing for that now?
So AB 43 changed several elements of the vehicle code. The ones that are most relevant were reducing by 5 miles per hour in business districts, which is what we use to reduce the speed limit on Solano Avenue to 20 miles per hour. The other one that's applicable is also allowing an additional 5 miles per hour reduction in what are identified as safety corridors, which have still yet to be defined, which is supposed to be done by that mid-2024 timeframe, and also roadways adjacent to heavy generators of pedestrian and bicycle volume, particularly vulnerable population. So I would assume schools will qualify for that, but that is also a component that kicks in mid-2024. So barring the additional information we're supposed to get and guidance on that, I would expect the roads that don't qualify for the 15, that are the higher volume or more lanes than we're allowed to do currently, which is essentially Buchanan and Marin, would allow us to consider 5 mile per hour reduction on those under the new elements of the law that kick in middle of next year.
So using the part of the law that has already gone into effect, we've already taken advantage of that on Solano, and is that really the only place in town where we could take advantage of that?
Yes.
There's nothing more there's no more action we can take to reduce speeds right now based on this law. Am I understanding right then that what we're recommending tonight is to begin the data collection so that when the remainder of the law goes into effect in a year and a half, we'll have all that data ready to go and can move more quickly to implement it then?
So, sorry, I was not trying to confuse the consideration of this program now. The 15 mile per hour that could be established within 500 feet of schools is on the books now. The action could be taken now. The discussions at prior transportation commissions that focused that really the speed concerns were not on the roadways that we could adopt this, that it was really Marin and Buchanan and safety at those roadways was the concern. So I'm just trying to present the information that there is some movement on those roadways that was really part of the discussion previously when the commission talked about reducing speed near schools.
So are you recommending that we begin studies related to those streets now, or that the action we take now should be limited to dealing with the streets that are already eligible for the treatment?
It's really a policy decision, I think, for the commission. In the earlier discussions, the focus was elsewhere, and we decided not to proceed. This last discussion at the commission wanted to see what a program would look like for us to go ahead and implement. So implementing on those 19 segments could happen. We would need to do the engineering and traffic studies. And I tried to present sort of the costs we expect associated with that work. It will be, if we proceeded with that, it will be coming soon after that, that we could be looking at Marin and Buchanan and changes to those roadways, speed limits near Ocean View, near Marin, near Cornell.
But we're not looking at those.
We're not looking at those tonight and what
Okay.
we were.
So then I think if I understand right, what you're saying is what we're doing tonight is revisiting an issue that we have visited in the past where the rules have not changed, and earlier commissions in earlier years, the commissions decided not to take action, and we're revisiting it with no changes from the state, just new commission, new public opinion, the only thing that's changed is essentially us.
That's correct. The commission has brought this forward every few years to revisit, and the last direction was to see what a program would look like. There was an outstanding question of whether we would need to do the engineering and traffic studies. We do need to do those. The council is allowed to adopt by resolution the reduced speed, but the language of the law says that they shall consider these elements of the engineering and traffic study when they make that action.
Can you give us an idea of how big a project the engineering and traffic study is? How much money, how many hours of time, how much?
That is in the staff report, actually.
Yeah, the number I would pull up, I think the estimate was in the $20,000 to $30,000 range for the analysis.
Yeah, okay, I see that now. Thanks.
Plus implementation and staff time please.
If I may then, the action that we could take would be to ask staff to spend up to $30,000 doing the data collection, prepare the resolution for council, go to council, and then council would make the decision on proceeding to reduce the speed limit to 15 mile an hour when children are present, and spending the $25,000 to implement. So out of the total $55,000 estimated cost, we would be making the decision tonight on the first 30, and council gets the rest of it. I assume it wouldn't come back to us in between, right?
So I was recommending proceeding to council. We would take to council, should we spend the money on doing the studies, and bring back to you a resolution. If there were factors you want to know in making the decision on whether we should proceed or not, if there's things that I can prepare in addition to the traffic surveys we had, or if you wanted to look at what was in the engineering and traffic studies, you could just, recommend that we proceed with getting those studies done. But if you want to recommend to council that, we implement the speed limits, they just need to be presented with that information in making that resolution.
Okay, so we could either tell you to go straight to council with the data or come back to us before going to council. Okay, thanks.
Just for a bit of context, last time this came up, we were on the commission, and there were two things that really contributed to the decision not to proceed. One of them was that the streets that we were most interested in affecting were not eligible at that time to have their speed limit, and still aren't until in 2024. have their speed limit reduced. And the other was a key story that you shared. Would you be willing to share that again?
The City of Berkeley did this shortly after the state law went into effect. We did before and after studies, and the net change was nothing. So we spent a bunch of money. We could have spent substantially more money putting in flashing beacons with the signs so that people would really pay attention to them. Speed feedback signs, things like that, probably in Berkeley to the tune of like $750,000. Council didn't want to do that. They wanted to do basically the signs, which is what's before us here. And the net result was behavior didn't change. So the concept is good. If people will comply, it's even better. If there's enforcement to go with it, maybe that's a way to get compliance. Short of that, it's kind of spending money to feel good was the concern. It's not a bad thing. I don't think it necessarily hurts unless you get people develop a sense of, well, I can ignore this rule and maybe I can ignore the next rule. So that's where it gets messy, is the effectiveness. The concept is great.
And I think one other point I remember from the story was that in Berkeley, all of these speed limits were implemented at the same time.
All at once.
So not only was there not a concentrated effort to enforce, but it would have been very difficult.
Yeah.
And there was no way to sort of roll it out, or it did not roll out gradually.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that again, because it was certainly very influential on the decision of the commission. So question I have is the engineering studies, are those to merely implement signage, or could they also involve changing the roadway to encourage the new speed limit?
So the engineering and traffic study is just looking at the vehicle, how the vehicles are operating on the roadway. So it's a little bit beyond the speed and volume surveys we do. They look at sort of the pacing of vehicles. There's a little different methodology. It's not, it's set up to meet the current way that the rules of establishing speed limit. It's not set up to make design recommendations. That would be something different than doing the basic study for speed limit setting.
Great. Any other questions, please?
Have we talked to the police department yet about this? What's the procedure to check in with John on things that might increase their workload?
I haven't talked about the speed limit, this specific project yet, but we would coordinate on the implementation of that. If there was a recommendation,
Okay, is it
with it.
possible to put the agenda recommendation up on the screen? Because I just have some semantic questions.
Okay.
But while we're doing that, in general,
We're going to hold comments until after public comment?
oh, this is just questions.
Okay.
Well, these are
You said I think, so you tipped me off.
All right, let me double check my notes. Maybe it's,
Take your time.
no, these are mostly comments. But I would like to point out, I think the language is a little confusing on the recommendation. I don't know if this is a question. It just seemed to put the cart before the horse. If we're going to say, we suggest to the city council that they go ahead and do this survey, but then we also give them a resolution, it seems like that's up to them, right? I mean, presumably doing the survey is going to reveal information that we don't have, and how they choose to do that, given they'll have at that point more information than us, ought to determine what the resolution is. So I was unclear like what we would put in the resolution to the city, to the city council.
I think your question is actually overlapping with Fareed's
Well,
question.
yes, and if I can kind of answer the question a little bit here, the traditional purpose of an engineering speed survey is to see if you can justify reducing the speed limit. So if we did a survey and said, oh, hey, look, the 85th percentile speed on Cornell is actually 16 miles an hour, we can just straight up post a 15-mile-an-hour speed limit by rounding it down. The likelihood is we'll find it's higher than that, and that we won't have justification to drop it to 15 miles an hour, but that council involvement under this, AB 43 is that they can override the engineering speed survey and say, well, we looked at the speed survey, it didn't justify it, but we're going to reduce the speed anyway. And that's the procedure that AB 43 set up, because prior to that, if we had done an engineering and speed survey and it actually justified a reduction by virtue of the 85th percentile speed being low enough, we could have always posted it. So the key difference here is just that ability for council to override the data, but the legislation says you have to at least look at the data before you override it. So the expectation is it's a technicality. Collect the data, look at the data, say, that's very nice, here's what we're going to do. Not really expecting it to necessarily justify, although some of the numbers that I saw that you put up there were below 25. So it might even pull off a couple of 20-mile-an-hour zones just based on the data. But it's unlikely in general. So the expectation, is that it is just a technicality, and that's why, as I read this, it seemed to suggest that we would say, go collect the data, then go to council and have them override the data and implement a 15-mile-an-hour. I might be wrong. We might be pleasantly surprised and see that people are actually driving slower as we hope they would. But I don't think it's a necessary part of the process.
Okay, yes. Now, and you were trying to explain this to me, but I wasn't quite getting it on the phone. Okay, that's fine. I just thought it was odd. I didn't understand it. Okay, I'm good.
I have one more question. Some of the signs that you showed in the example say speed limit such and such when children are present. Is that an assumption that anything that comes out of this project is going to have that language on the speed signs and that we're not changing the underlying speed limit for these blocks?
Under the existing rules for in proximity to schools. The 2024 changes, schools are a generator, so it could be under that, but that wouldn't, assuming we're starting with 25 miles per hour, that would allow you to drop to 20 beyond when children are present. But for the 500 feet of schools, what we can do today, dropping to 15 miles per hour would be just when children are present.
Okay, thanks.
What's the legal threshold for determining when children are present, or the expectation of children are present?
It's discussed a little bit in the law. It's essentially pick up, drop off when kids are between, transitioning between classes kind of thing, but there's some language. Rather than posting the hours, the signs will say just when children are present, and it's how California has dealt with not having to customize the signs to bell schedules, I think.
Okay, thank you. Further questions? I think we're ready for public comment.
Good evening. My name is Jeremiah. When I heard about this being on the agenda, it brought happy tears to my eyes. This is a great thing to recommend to City Council. I think the goal for this is to reduce the speeds, to potentially save a children's life. We know young children, they don't all know to not chase a ball crossing the street. A lot of children and parents don't always use crosswalks. During loading and drop-off times, it's a really big cluster, and it's a really unsafe time to be walking in the street or using crosswalks. So the goal is to make it safer around the schools. I think every single parent of children in the school district would be so thankful for this to happen. I think all the teachers would be happy. I know I would be happy myself. It would be nice if, I don't know, the city manager and the school district maybe had some conversations. You know, on the map that you brought up, the possible streets, I'm not sure if you can maybe bring that up again while I'm talking, but I didn't see any streets around the preschool on Albany Hill. Maybe I missed that. There's definitely a lot of concerned citizens regarding this topic, and I know a lot of people are talking about it. I've driven past El Cerrito High School during drop-off and pickup times. They actually have one police officer designated to post at the high school during drop-off and pickup times to keep traffic under control and to keep things safe. I know any citizen can actually call the Albany Police Department and request extra traffic patrol around a different area. Last year, there were some abductions or something around those Albany schools, and the police department was able to do extra patrol around the schools. I like the fact that the signs will say during school hours. Yeah, I don't see up there around the preschool in Albany Hill, but maybe that could be a potential area to look at. I'm not sure if the city owns the air hose speed surveys down at Public Works. I'm not sure how that much would cost, but the price, I don't know how to say this correctly, but we can't put a price on safety for our students. We can't put a price on saving someone's life. $30,000, $50,000, it's a small price to pay to save someone's life. Thank you.
Thank you.
We don't have any hands raised online.
Thank you. So let's bring it back to the commission for comments and potential motions. I'm sorry, do we have somebody?
Yes, we did just get somebody online, and then it went down again. Oh, here it is again. Okay.
Let's see if we can't get them on.
Mr. Vogt, please go ahead.
Hi. Just wanted to check and see if preschools were going to be included in this reduction of speeds. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, I'm sure we don't have any other hands because we don't have any other participants.
Good to know. Thank you. Commissioners.
We've had a couple of people from the public mention preschools, so do you want to speak to that?
I'm unclear whether we could do it around preschools or where we would draw the line if we could. I'd have to do more research to know whether that's allowed.
The Albany Children's Center does pre-K, I think, which may be considered elementary school.
And there are plenty of, in-home daycare centers that we may or may not even know about. So
This is true.
that would be hard to, I don't know, seems like that would be tough to deal with.
I concur with one of our speakers that we need to talk to the school district and see if they have interest and what their opinions might be. I also feel strongly that just posting signs is not necessarily effective. If we can't coordinate with a change in the design speed for the roadway and some perhaps transitory enforcement, I don't see why behavior would change. And I agree with all the reasons that we want to lower the speed. This is, I do want to lower the speed, but I don't see changing the signs as an effective way to increase safety, because I don't think they're effective.
Sure. I guess I'll say the same thing in slightly different words of absolutely reducing speeds in school zones would be highly desirable. Reduces severity, it reduces the likelihood of crashes, it is, would be such a great thing to have. How we get there is the conundrum here. If this were free, I'd be tempted to say, do it immediately. And then I'd stop and think and go, but what effect will that have? If the effect is that people will ignore the signs, are we training people to ignore signs? Because if we know that they're not going to obey it, what's the outcome? If the outcome were actually reduced speeds, even a little bit reduced, it would be worthwhile. But if the speeds aren't going down, then the secondary unintended consequence pops up to me that's like all these folks who, if there is no enforcement, there's no teeth to it, then we're kind of training people to be scofflaws. And that's frightening because it has the potential to make things worse rather than just have no effect. So I guess my sense is if the police department is interested in doing some focused, targeted enforcement to go along with this, I would be interested. So what that means is I don't think I can make a recommendation on this until I hear from our police department what they want to do with it. And if we want to pursue that type of targeted, focused enforcement. So I think that would be my recommendation is let's consult the police department and see what information they have for us, because that would be the pivotal distinction between are we potentially doing harm or are we potentially doing good?
My experience with signs that say speed limit such and such when children are present, as a driver, when I see that sign, I just find it kind of confusing. I don't think it changes my behavior. And my reaction is always, well, I don't see any kids, so I'll keep going the speed I was going. And then when I see a kid, it's too late. Like I could try to slow down suddenly when I realize, oh, there are kids here, but that doesn't help the kid. By the time I see the kid, if I should have been slowing down to protect that kid, I should have done it before I even knew that there were kids there. So personally, my experience with those signs is mostly in rural areas when I'm on a road trip and I'm on a highway that goes through a part of a town where you're going at 40 or 50 miles an hour, and then there's a speed limit sign about children to slow down very abruptly to 25 or something. And I've just found that I can't really obey that. I think in Albany it might be a little more effective because people aren't going 40 and 50 miles an hour to start with, and people who are using those streets are probably more habitual users. They're not people traveling from out of town. They're people who are using those streets all the time and could become familiar with the pattern and think to themselves, okay, this is a time when schools are open, so I'll go a little slower. But I'm a little concerned that most drivers just aren't paying enough attention to really do that based on a sign with a lot of words on it. Another observation that I remember distinctly from when my son was younger and I was more involved in drop-off and pickup, which was a pretty long time ago now, but my memory of it is my sense of the big problem with traffic during drop-off and pickup times is not that it's too fast. I don't think anybody can go faster than about 15 miles an hour during drop-off and pickup times because there's such a crunch of drivers trying to drop off and pick up their kids. And that means the cars are moving slowly. It's not necessarily a good thing because I think there's a lot of problem behaviors that crop up around those jams, people pulling out into the opposing lane to try to get past a blockage, or people double parking, people stopping in a zone where they're not supposed to stop, or people turning around. It felt kind of like chaos to me, and I don't think it was an especially safe environment to be a kid trying to move around in this busy cluster of traffic. But the dangerous part of it, I don't think, was the speed. The speed could be a dangerous part of the traffic situation at a time when it's not crowded. But I think at those times, those are more likely to be times when a typical driver would not think of it as when children are present. So overall, this feels to me like it's an attempt to do something about what we see as a problem, but it doesn't, similar to what both of you said, I don't feel that this is really effectively targeting the actual problem in a way that's likely to improve it. I could be convinced otherwise if you feel differently, but that's my first impression.
Could we put the map up again of the affected streets that we have the,
Could you speak into the mic?
oh, sorry.
Thanks.
Could we put the map up again of the affected streets, the ones we can affect now? Oh, and also say, while I'm here, Jeremiah, I distinctly remember when you first started coming to city council meetings, it must have been 8 years ago, and this was your issue, reducing speeds in school zones. And that was your only issue, and so you hammered away at this for 8 years, and here we are. Okay, these comments are going to sound trivial because I don't want to spend much time repeating the more thoughtful things other commissioners have already said, because I agree. What bothers me about this map is that it's just so piecemeal that you'll have all these little zones where people slow down for a couple of blocks and they speed up again, and they're kind of sprinkled almost randomly around town. So, if you had a whole long corridor where the speed was reduced for, a mile, that would be one thing, but it's kind of all over the map, literally. So I think that would make anything we do less effective. But I pretty much just agree with the other comments. I think this may not change behavior much. Other minor criticisms, people who live near the schools already get annoyed enough about not being able to park because all the kids park around their neighborhood. And if now they have to try to negotiate all these sign and speed changes, they're just going to be more annoyed. That may not be a big consideration. I'm just saying that. I also, from doing Blue Glove Crew with Ken and seeing signage around town, I'm not impressed that the city does a great job of maintaining the current amount of signage that we have. So this will just give them more work to do that probably won't get done. I mean, there's times I've been lost at night in Albany because I look for the street signs and they're just not there. I'm like, is this Canes or Stanage? Or it doesn't solve the fast Main Street problems as people have mentioned. This one was important. I know maybe this has changed in 20 years. I hope so. But back when I was on school board 20 years ago, the main problem, and it's common all over the country, is the rugby scrum of cars that pull up in front of the school, and the kids have to run the gauntlet between these cars. That's where kids get hurt.
Have to run the gauntlet. You mean parents let their kids out in traffic to run between the cars?
Yes.
They don't have to run the gauntlet.
Well, I think if their mom says, go to school, the kids feel like they have to run the gauntlet. But on that note, the solution to that was the program that you've done a lot of work on, which is safe walking routes to school. So parents can, feel good about their kids walking to school because it's only 1 square mile town. Kids can do it until they're 16, then they have to drive. But
My kids didn't.
well, just 20 seconds worth, my experience with teenage boys is they only talk to you if they're in a car. So sometimes I would drive my kid 3 blocks to school just so I could figure out what the hell was going on with them.
What does that say about our society? We don't have time for that.
Yeah, I was going to say, how long a discussion would you like about that? I hate to say this, but being a cyclist, you guys are probably familiar with this. The force you hit the ground with is the square of your speed, right? I think that's a physical rule. So crashing at 20 miles an hour hurts a lot more than crashing at 10 miles an hour. And a kid getting hit by a car at 10 miles an hour is survivable. A kid getting hit by a car at 20 miles an hour could be pretty serious. If they get hit at 30 miles an hour, it's always going to be fatal.
It's a logarithmic relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's just something to keep in mind. And the last thing is, for what it's worth, I have one of those old-fashioned plug-in Garmin GPS units, and it beeps at me with this very unique beep whenever I'm near a school zone. And my cell phone, however, doesn't do that. So there's some way to tell Garmin or these companies where to make that really does help alert me to when I'm near a school zone. But in general, I agree with the other comments. Changing a speed limit by 5 miles an hour probably doesn't change behavior at all. I would be surprised. So that's it. Thank you.
I have one more thought about kind of the political context of this, which is none of us has come up with a strong reason why we don't want to proceed with this. I think we're not seeing a lot of strong reasons to proceed, but one thing that might influence this commission to proceed differently is if there were a visible upswell of community support for a project like this. I think what we've seen is a kind of a very long-term push by a very small number of people to try to get this idea in front of us and get it implemented. And that can be effective, but what's much more effective would be a larger number of people. And giving us some sense that this is really what the community wants. And I think with that in mind, at least I would be more inclined to say, okay, it may not be the best idea, but let's do it anyway because it's what the community wants. And that's just, it's just a little bit of a different approach to kind of lobbying, if you will, than I think what we've seen here.
Yeah, my sense is if you had to spend $80,000 on something, which is maybe what we're going to spend in the long run if you factor in staff time, whatever, $55,000, right, plus something. What would be, someone puts a gun to your head and says, you guys have to spend $55,000. What would be the optimal thing for us to do with $55,000? I'm not sure this would be it. We do have speed pillows on Santa Fe, right, by by Marin School.
Yes.
Is there some history about whether they work or not, or whether we'd want to do that somewhere else? I could probably do that on my block, actually.
I'll defer to staff for that history. I only have anecdotal evidence.
That's probably better than mine in terms of the speed humps on Santa Fe. That predates me. The ones on Key Route, I was told were in conjunction with construction there, but I'm not sure the Santa Fe if it was. I think it predates the intersection safe route improvements.
I'm sorry, which one?
Santa Fe Marin and Curtis Marin intersection improvements. That was a safe routes project. I think
the speed humps actually came along with the intersection.
Okay, it was in conjunction with
Yeah.
The ones on Santa Fe.
Yeah.
I will say, however, because my Subaru has a very supple suspension, I actually try to speed up and hit those as hard as I can and figure out just where the comfort zone is. And I can go over those at 25 miles an hour pretty easily. So
I'm sorry to hear that.
Perverse incentives, right?
We all have to make our own decisions.
Yeah, it's still on the speed limit.
Fair enough.
And not while children are present.
The neighbors might not love the sound that you make when you do that.
It doesn't
I'll just
scrape.
throw that out there. You don't know what it sounds like outside the car. So anecdotally, I will say that the speed humps along the block with the school on Santa Fe are probably placed too far apart to significantly reduce the speed on the street.
We actually had a letter to the commission about this a few days ago. I'm not sure if it was in connection with this agenda item or if it was just a general.
I believe that was involving the intersection further south.
No, there was one person who wrote about
Oh,
Santa Fe all the way from Marin to Ramona. From Joe Riggio Curley, if I'm saying the name correctly. This letter is in the, I believe this was in the public.
I'll let you read it.
So I'll try to read the part of it that's specific to what this person is suggesting. Vehicle speeds on Santa Fe Avenue in front of Marin School feel extremely unsafe, and my hope is that we can implement an engineered solution that forces drivers to slow down. The speed bumps help somewhat. They're too far south. Recommend raised crosswalks at both the intersections with Marin and Ramona, and signage and speed limits are too easily ignored. We could get the speed down to 20 miles per hour if we re-engineered the road with that in mind. More chicanes and bulb outs, narrowing the street to introduce a protected bike lane. So it's really not, I guess, I wasn't sure if this letter was in response to this agenda item, but probably not, because it's not recommending that we put in these signs that the agenda item is about.
Right, in fact, it recommends engineering solutions and doesn't mention signs. Yeah.
It mentions signs only to say that drivers easily ignore them.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess if, as Fareed said, if the Albany Police Department indicated that they would want to support this program, either in phases or however, that might be the encouragement we would need to move forward. But lacking that, I think I would want to wait to see what happens with the Department of Transportation in their next revision of the California Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices in advance of the 2024 provisions of AB 43. This doesn't seem like a good expenditure.
Right, so I think in response to what I'm hearing from the other commissioners, my anecdotal observation is on Masonic by the Albany Preschool. Well, I spent a lot of time there the last few weekends with my son painting their ramps and railings. Observed cars slowing down substantially to go over the speed table that's there, the raised crosswalk. So physical engineering solutions can and do have a positive effect. And we could do 2, maybe 3 of those. I don't know, depending on how big a project it's part of with the same quantity of money. So to Commissioner Barnes' question of, hey, you got to spend this money, what do you spend it on? Traffic calming treatments or signs? And I think that, as Commissioner Chomsky said, in that letter, signs don't do anything. It's probably not far off from what we've observed. So what that's leading me to is a motion, perhaps, that we recommend that staff consult with the police department and come back with a recommendation from the police department as to whether they feel that they could apply enforcement sufficient to make these signs be effective in reducing speeds on an ongoing basis. If so, I think we might have a path forward that we could feel confident about. So that would be my motion. Basically to consult with the police department, and if they think that it's viable to enforce on an ongoing basis, to come back to the commission.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion?
No.
Seeing none, can we take a roll vote?
Commissioner Barnes,
Yes.
Commissioner Chomsky,
Yes.
Commissioner Javindal,
Aye.
Chair McCroskey.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Great. Thank you for preparing this information and presenting it to us.
Very well-prepared report. Thank you.
And with that, we're going to move on to item number 5.2, the expenditure of sugar sweetened beverage tax monies.
Thank you. So this is an annual item. It's regarding the use of an estimated $260,000 in tax proceeds from the 1 cent tax on distributing sugar sweetened beverages. The aim of the ordinance was to apply the revenue towards health and well-being. The commission has, in prior years, has requested a report out on the prior year program costs. This outlines the expenditures from last year's. The first 3 were programs recommended by the commission last year and had been multi-year programs: the crossing guard program, the bike safety program, which is the in-school bicycle education for elementary and middle school students, the Healthy Me and Music Movement Program, and this last year also included a couple of other programs. The Albany Swims is a program for swim education through AUSD for qualifying students, and Move and Groove is a 5K course event for walking, running, roller skating, wheelchairing or strolling. And the costs associated with those were approaching getting to programs using the estimated annual expenses at this point, coming to $255,000 with those programs. In prior years, the commission has also requested a recommendation from city staff for a capital project to be considered for inclusion. I don't have a big ticket item for you tonight, but we are recommending additional funds toward the bike link lockers, which were funded in last year's expenditure plan for $30,000, with an additional amount to enable the use of bike link and regional transit cards to access the lockers. And so that is the main expenditure from staff for a project cost I have for you tonight. And the process is for the commission to submit a recommendation to the city council, which would then be presented along with recommendations from other entities at an upcoming study session, which is tentatively scheduled for April 17th. And additional information has now been updated on the city website on this funding source and what it's been used towards at the link shared. And that's accessed from the Our City portion of the city website if you're navigating there. And with that, staff is seeking a recommendation to City Council for the use of the sugar sweetened beverage tax proceeds for fiscal year 2024. Thank you.
Can you tell us about how many other entities are making recommendations?
Let me pull that up, who else this goes to. Hold on a sec. It goes to the City Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Commission, the Social and Economic Justice Commission, the Transportation Commission, and we're also supposed to solicit recommendations from a designated representative of AUSD.
Okay.
But the table that you showed us with the different programs, that's combining all the recommendations from all of those commissions.
That was the,
Last year, that's not just our part, the transportation.
that's correct. That was the city council expenditure plan for last year. So they took in the recommendations from all the advisory bodies and made a decision on what to expend money towards.
Were there any programs that, oh yeah, I think it says all of the recommendations that our commission made last year got included in the council's final program.
That's correct. Last year, the commission recommended the crossing guard program, the bike safety program, the Healthy Me music and movement program, and the bicycle path improvements adjacent to the Saha housing development, which was a project expenditure.
So last year, the total cost of the items we recommended was more than,
It was approximately 250,000.
even including the bike path?
It was just so in the chart I shared, the subtotal amount was the 3 programs that were recommended by this body last year. Let me pull that back up for you. So this body recommended the top 3 programs that are subtotaled to 226 plus a $60,000 project last year. And the bottom 2 programs are newer programs that were not in the commission recommendation last year, but were funded by council.
Okay, I see what that is then. But the bike path improvements for $61,000 were or were not approved by?
That was in the council expenditure plan.
Okay, so the total expenditure last year was 300 something.
Close to 300.
I thought I saw 350 somewhere.
Yeah, it was, I think, in one of the attachments. I can pull up
Yeah,
the number for you.
but this year we're expecting to have much less revenue. Is that
Well, there's an annual, it's general fund dollars. It's an annual influx estimated at 260,000. In the expenditure plan, council can choose to expend general fund dollars, I think, beyond that towards
okay?
the
So
health and
so the
wellness.
the council's approval of $350,000 of spending was in excess of what the tax actually brought in. That
It was in excess of the annual. I think part of the consideration was how much has been expended over time, but it's year by year.
Maybe the expenditures were less than the revenues in prior years and
Yeah,
more. in
but
other
it's
years.
expenditure of general fund.
Okay, but we shouldn't expect the council to be spending $350,000 this year. That was kind of an unusual bump last year, is that?
That's my understanding, that we should just be expecting an expenditure of the money that's coming
About
in.
260, okay.
Yeah, I see in the attachment that, a total of $346,000 were allocated last year from all sources. And that includes the initial outlay for the bike link lockers at the waterfront at $30,000, which did not come from this commission, but came directly from a council motion. other commissioner questions on this item?
Well, I just want to say I have so much history with the crossing guard program and the sugar sweetened beverage tax, which I never thought that was a good model. So I'm happy to just go along with the consensus of this group. I really think, given how piecemeal the process is that this should just be put in the general fund and have the council deal with it directly. And, take comments in council. And I will say remain annoyed after all these years that the school district has never been willing to spend any of their money on helping us out with the crossing guard program. And then if anybody really wants to know what I think, I wrote a long op-ed about this for Berkeley side several years ago and documented all my concerns. And if you're really interested, you can just read that, and I won't bother to go any further than that. So I'm just happy to go along with whatever you guys want to do.
Okay, but we're going to take public comment before we,
Oh, sorry.
you remember the process.
It'll come back to me.
Yeah, okay. We'll give you some leeway. It looks like we do have public comment in the room. We've taken that first before, so I'm going to ask if there are any online.
I don't see any right now. If you're online and would like to make a comment, please use the raise your hand feature.
And we'll see if that comes up, and meanwhile, we'll take in room.
Good evening. My name is Jeremiah. Justin, did you say that the sugar sweetened beverage tax is 1 cent per dollar? Is that correct, or
It's 1 cent per ounce.
1 cent per ounce? Okay. So
Sounds right.
we would easily double the money if somehow city council were to approve 2 cents per ounce. We would have twice as big of a budget. So I propose somehow recommending to increase it to 2 cents per ounce. Instantly, you have twice as much money to spend. Let's see here. I'm not sure if that includes fountain drinks or juice, such as certain things like a Splenda or agave or substitutes for sugar. Okay. So I think that we should go with definitely recommending to council to support the crossing guard program. I do agree with Commissioner Barnes that the school district could somehow help out. I do know that in the history, the UC Berkeley was paying for 3 out of the 6 crossing guards. And I think a long time ago, the Albany police used to actually have their own crossing guards. So it was funded by the police, maybe, and then it went to UC Berkeley. Maybe we can recommend to UC Berkeley to help support that again, if they so choose. I would definitely support re-adding to this, the crossing guard program. I feel it's the only thing we're doing so far to help reduce speed around the schools. The crossing guard program is so far the only thing that is helping keep our students and pedestrians safe while crossing the streets. With that, I would actually, with my 30 seconds left, I would actually propose raising the crossing guard recommendation to hire at least 1 more crossing guard. I was going to throw in, 6 crossing guards, but that's asking too much. It would be nice to see at least 1 more crossing guard on Cornell and Solano. That's such a high traffic area. So Cornell and Solano definitely needs a crossing guard. Thank you.
We don't have any hands raised online.
Thank you. So we'll bring it back to the commission for comments and opinions. I remember reading your article, and while I don't totally agree. I don't totally disagree either. I think it's not up to this commission to tell the council how to budget, but it is our purview to support safety. So I think we can make those recommendations and leave the details up to them to a certain degree.
I'll be short and sweet. I like the staff recommendation. I think everything on here is worthy of support.
I like the staff recommendation. I wish that we had a little bit more vigorous public process with more people getting involved with ideas and requests, because this is a pot of money where an opportunity for people to speak up and ask for it to be spent on what they want. And if we don't hear from people, I think it certainly is I think the staff recommendation is a perfectly good place to start and land, short of anything else put on our radar.
I will say one thing, that I agree that I think training kids in bicycle safety is good, because I think there's just something inherently dangerous about two-wheeled vehicles, and ultimately your safety depends on your skill level. So the higher we can boost up the skill level of our community, the better we are.
With the thought that other organizations within the city are going to be asking for pieces of this budget, I'm interested in breaking up our recommendation into two groups. So to me, the key sort of aligned programs here, and nothing is totally unaligned, but I see the crossing guards, bike safety, and the bike locker integration upgrade as sort of core. And then I also support Healthy Me and Music and Albany Swims, which, water safety, that could be transportation, right, if you stretched it. And Move and Groove. So, but I see those last three things in sort of a separate category. And if council was down to making a choice, I would want them to know that we have a priority in the first group and not the second, and the second group is a lower priority.
That's a very good point. We can't assume that council is going to approve all of the things in our recommendation, because our recommendation covers the full cost, the full amount of money that they're dealing with here. And if they get other suggestions from other groups and have to take the top priorities from each group, they need to know what our top priorities are.
That's where I'm at.
And I agree with the sort of two-tiered prioritization that you just stated.
I'm a little softer on the bike link access hub, because I see it as a convenience item, where I see the crossing guards and the bike safety as directly safety related. I won't disagree with the recommendation. I almost would stick the bike link access hub in with the other ones, and just, for me, the focus is on crossing guards and bike safety, although looking at the purpose of the sugar sweetened beverage tax, Healthy Me feels like it's also hitting that purpose well. So I don't feel strongly enough that I would vote differently from everyone else if they want to go with what you've recommended, but just sharing my opinion.
Thank you. Yeah.
I basically like your recommendations too. I will say that there's 3 life skills I think you need for safety in California. Kids should know how to ride bikes. They should know how to swim in case they ever get swept into the waves at Ocean Beach. And they'll have to learn how to camp, because when the earthquake comes, they'll be camping in their backyard for several days. But
So we're going to add a program.
No.
For learn to camp.
But I think, given the pool is a school facility.
When are you offering this program?
Yeah, my backyard, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well, the neighbors will love that.
Yeah.
No, but I think the pool is a school district responsibility, and I think teaching kids to swim is a school district responsibility. But, you know, I'll defer to your judgment.
So just to be clear, the Albany Swims was in my second tier.
Right.
And to respond to that, the bike lockers, as I understand it, this additional cost came up. And so to me, I think of it as sort of completing the project. Okay. Further discussion? Would anybody like to make a motion? It's my list. Do you want me to make the motion?
Please.
Okay, I'm happy to do that. The chair usually doesn't, but I'm happy to in this case. So let's see. So we don't have recommendation, right? Discuss. Okay. So I move that we recommend that to the council the item for crossing guards, the item for bike safety, and the bike locker upgrade as our priority items. And that we also support the Healthy Music and Me, Albany Swims, and Move and Groove items.
The amounts in the staff report?
In the amounts as indicated in the staff report.
I will second that.
Okay. Any discussion?
I'll just note that the amounts are subject to revision because they're last year's figures, but I will.
Okay.
Do you want to, should
Happy
we?
to strike that.
Well, should we, in the amounts, in the approximate amounts as named in the staff report? And if there's no further discussion, we can take a roll vote.
Commissioner Barnes?
Yes.
Commissioner Chomsky?
Yes.
Commissioner Javindel?
Aye.
Chair McCroskey?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Great. Thank you. And we're going to move right along to the appreciation for past commissioners. And
So I don't have a presentation on this, but I can pull up the draft resolutions if you want to review those.
if you'll just give me a moment, I did not get time to read these beforehand.
Wow. 8 years.
Eight years, wow, okay. Okay. Are we taking public comment on this item?
Did frame it as a
As an agenda, discussion item, yes.
adopting resolution, so I would say we're taking an
So
action here.
if there are no questions from the commissioners, I will open it for public comment.
Would you like me to bring up the second one
I'm sorry,
to review as well?
does anybody need the second one up? Why don't you go ahead and bring the second one up as we take public comment?
Yeah, Jeremiah here. I do want to thank Commissioner Del Rosario and also Commissioner Zadie Graham. It's a lot of work, and they should be recognized and definitely appreciated for their hard work. They served on the body for many years, at least 2 years, and, you know, people got to feel appreciated. People got to feel like their work was appreciated by people. And so I'm just here as a member of the public. I'm just letting these commissioners know that what they did was a great job, and it's great that they're recognized for their service.
Thank you for that succinct comment.
We don't have any hands online.
We don't have any comments online. Is there any discussion, or would anybody like to add anything to these proclamations?
I think they're As I read them, I see them as reflecting the character of the service that they provided. And while we probably could come up with more, I think it hits the highlights well. So offhand, nothing pops into my head that I feel like is missing. So I'd be happy to make a motion to adopt the resolutions of appreciation for Commissioner Del Rosario and Commissioner Graham.
Great.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? And I had a chance to give input, so I'm happy with the result, and I think we're ready for a roll vote.
Commissioner Barnes,
Yes.
Commissioner Chomsky,
Yes.
Commissioner Javindal, Chair McCroskey.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Terrific. And that takes us to the selection of chair and vice chair, the reorganization of the commission. I've served 2 terms as chair, and I believe Robert was the vice chair this last year. Not sure. I had a conversation with Commissioner Pang, both at the last commission meeting or at the end of it, and then we communicated over email. He said that he would be willing to accept the vice chair position. I suggested that at the last meeting that since he wasn't here, he was exposed to being elected chair, but I will admit that that's not particularly fair, and he is willing to step up as vice chair, so I put that to you for your consideration. So would anybody like to nominate somebody for the chair position?
Anyone to my right? No, I, in all seriousness, I think any of the commissioners here would do a fine job. I think you've done a great job. I have no problem with you continuing, but should
I
anyone
don't think I
else
can.
feel inspired to do so, I would support them.
Well, since I'm the new person, I really shouldn't be the chair, because I just don't have enough institutional knowledge, I think. But I could be the vice chair if you could get Mr. Pang, is that his last name? Twist his arm and bump him up a little bit. I'd be the vice chair.
Well, there is another option. Harry has been on the commission before.
Ah,
He's got some background.
He does have some background. Would you be willing to serve as chair?
Yes.
And I will nominate Commissioner Chomsky as chair.
I'll second that.
Okay. Any discussion or a last-minute change of heart? Okay.
Thank you for the nominations.
Let's put that to a vote.
Any public comment?
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. We should accept public comment.
I'm in no, I'm not a decision maker here on who should be chair and who should be vice chair. Like Javindale said, you're all really good here. I guess there's one commissioner missing, but I guess you already got his input on it. I was just going to say, all due fairness, just include his input, but it seems like you already have. And so it looks like Mr. Harry Chomsky, you've been the only one nominated. I'm not sure if that's true or not, but yeah, it looks like, I guess I could say the first person to congratulate you.
Well, he hasn't been voted in yet. Okay. Hold your horses. Anyone on? No, thank you. No one online is prepared to make a comment. Is there any further discussion? Then we're ready for a roll vote.
Commissioner Barnes,
Yes.
Commissioner Chomsky,
Yes.
Commissioner Javindal, Chair McCroskey.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Congratulations.
And as
Would
my-
you like to take over
My
immediately?
first order of business, would anyone like to nominate a vice chair?
Well, I think we should nominate Mr. Pang, although I've never met him. But
I will second that.
I'm in favor of that.
Any discussion, any public comment about this nomination?
So I think I'll turn that into a motion. So I,
Okay, then let's take a roll call.
second? Any second?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
Commissioner Barnes?
Yes.
Commissioner McCroskey?
Yes.
Commissioner Javindel?
Aye.
Chair Chomsky?
Yes.
Motion carries.
And congratulations. Oh, I'm sorry. It's going to be tough. It's going to be tough.
Congratulations to Mr. Peng in absentia. Okay, that concludes our action items. So let's move on to announcements. Do we have any? And I don't see anything in the agenda about specific announcements. Are there?
Main announcement is that advisory body training is next Thursday, 6 to 7:30 for all commissioners, committee members, staff liaisons. And there have been changes to state regulations on meetings and that kind of thing, so there will be things to update you on.
Any other commissioners have announcements? Ken?
I'd like to note that the ACTC comment period on the San Pablo Avenue plans is still open and active. There's quite a good interface to give your input on specific improvements and intersections, and I encourage everybody to do so. And I think the link to that is in a previous agenda.
Would you be comfortable speaking about the City of Berkeley public comment on the Ohlone Greenway?
Yeah, I think that pretty much sums it up. Yeah, the city of Berkeley is taking comments on the Ohlone Greenway improvement projects between the Albany border and just shy of the North Berkeley BART station. This includes the crossings of streets as well as the pathway, lighting, width, general enhancements around that. So any input on the website for the project would certainly be welcome.
Can you advise people how to find that website?
I should remember the link, and I'm blanking on that one.
It's a Fair and Piers
Yeah,
site, right?
yeah, that's why
I think I
I
have.
remember if we have a link to it directly, but
I can see the link here on my screen, but I don't think I can share it. It's fairandpiers.mysocialpinpoint.com/Ohlone Greenway. And it's only taking public comment for a few more days, ending on March 1st.
first.
Now, Fareed, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I recall there was a UC employee there was a fatality on that bike path. Many years ago, he was northbound near Gilman.
Curtis and Peralta, it was actually a medical emergency.
Right. That was the official word, but I knew people who knew him, and they felt he really wasn't at risk from a medical emergency. But in any case, I guess my question is, when you have a fatality like that on a bike path, does that people remember and they think about that when they redesign it?
They do. Normally, if there's something in the design that contributes in a noticeable way, that becomes a priority to be addressed. I think along there, it really is just a question of, it's so heavily used. People would love to have it be as wide as it is in Albany. The space is very limited. So it will be a question of trade-offs between path width and trees and vegetation, things of that nature. So it's constrained. So the input really needs to be, hey, we recognize the constraints and what is our highest priority. So I don't want to get too far carried away since this is just an announcement, but I think that type of input would be very welcome on the website to help the city prioritize what's the most important thing to do along the pathway.
Okay.
Any other announcements? Future agenda items.
If we hear back from the police department with a favorable position relative to the reduced speed limits in school zones, that would be one.
Okay, is there any other business before we adjourn?
Make a public comment?
Are items 6 and 7 open to public comment, or?
I believe the intention is just suggestions of items that the general public comment is the time for members of the public to input at it, but you could set a short amount of, you can adjust the amount of time for comment to a short.
So shortening the comment time is one strategy. Another is to ask the potential public commenter if they're going to say something that's not otherwise in the letters or comment that they've made tonight.
Let's take 1 minute to hear what it is that you'd like to.
1 minute is more than enough. I agree with Javandel, future agenda item regarding the police department coming back with some data. I would also include in that future agenda item reaching out to the school district and potentially having some feedback from the school board on, their thoughts on the reduced speed. And also, I just want to get to 6 real quick, that I would just suggest that maybe this commission, if we're doing anything on the Allony Greenway in Albany, maybe it could be an actual agenda item for discussion. That way public comments has time to say something or be aware of the ACBE online thing to post stuff. And with that, I just want to also suggest that the Allony Greenway, every light bulb above an intersection should be working.
Thank you. Our next meeting is March 23rd at 7 p.m. and this meeting is adjourned.